All right, so here's what we're working on today. It's a 50-gallon fuel cell. If you can see that right there, 50 gallons, and this thing was actually built in 1998, so it's almost 20 years old, but it's in really good shape. And the first thing I'm gonna do is come back here in the back and mount it down to my truck bed. And I'm actually gonna leave this little bit of a gap because I think I'm gonna put my extra hose down in there so I can't get damaged, and I can stick a few other things in here. Okay, I've got the back screwed down on both tabs, and I'm just using sheet metal screws for doing roofing. They're 1 inch. Okay, now we're gonna mount this front. So this thing had a toolbox on it. It was bolted onto here. I took that off because I don't want it taking up all my bed. So I'm gonna take the mount that used to be on the front of this and cut it into pieces and make mounts to go here down to the truck bed. It's roughly 4 inches from here to the truck bed. So I'm gonna add 2 inches to mount here, and then 2 inches to mount here. So that'll make 8 inches, and that's what we'll cut off. We'll mark 2 inches, cut that, and bend this tab up. All right, so just like this, and I should be able to bend that. So that's got what I need. I don't know that these are even necessary, but I like to have them because, you know, it just keeps the fuel tank from trying to tip or anything. With weight in it, it's probably not really going to try to, but I'd still rather have it. And I mean, that holds really well. We'll go ahead and do the other side, but that's already holding nice. Okay, one thing about mine is used and almost 20 years old. This was hooked straight to a pickup truck as an auxiliary fuel tank. Most fuel cells don't have this, but I just plugged this off, put a new gasket on it, and then it's got a cover, so I'm gonna cover that up. So most of the time though, there's not gonna be one of these on a tank that you buy. It's a Fill-Rite 15 gallon per minute, and you do have to make sure that it's 12 volt and not 12 volt DC and not 120 volt AC, because some of these are actually designed to go onto a building like house power, but the direct current, that's for a vehicle like a car battery. All right, I was always curious how these things worked. So it's got ports here to pick up fuel, and then on the inside this tube is telescopic and it actually has a seal. So basically any length this is set at, it will pick up fuel through these holes, and this could be modified if you wanted to, or it even says in the instructions you can use your own custom hose. I think this is gonna work because when we put it into the tank, the thread's set to right here fully collapsed, and I think that's gonna be enough to get us sealed up. If not, I would have to trim some off of the end of it, which is not out of the question. This is the pump, and in the instructions it says to pull these bolts and take this head off to put that on. I think it's just for ease of putting it on, making it easier to actually get into there. I don't really want to take this apart and risk that gasket leaking, so I'm going to leave it alone if at all possible. And the screen is already in there. I don't know if you can see it, but it's already inside there. That's another thing the instructions say. And then it comes with Teflon or PTFE thread tape, but I've got a better one that I really like, so I'm gonna be using this instead of what comes with it. I'm just gonna throw that away. And then this hose right, this pickup tube will just go straight into the bottom of the pump assembly here. That's actually not even going to fit. So when I set this into the tank fully collapsed like this, the threads start about at the bottom of this. You can almost thread it on, so I really just need that thread depth changed, and that's a 1 inch thread depth. And with this fully collapsed, and before you get to the inner portion, it's 1.5 inches. Actually just over 1.5 inches. So it goes up to right there. That's where the gasket and such on the inside where it's telescoping. Comes to right here. So my thought is if I cut the 1 inch off to get my thread depth I need, that'll leave me this much room to cut these relief holes back in to pull fuel. And I should be able to modify this and make it work, so we're gonna go ahead and do that now. And I'm gonna pull this down because I don't want, where I'm cutting, I don't want it near the seal on the end of this tube and it melt that seal, so I'm gonna pull this way down to keep the heat off of that seal. Alright, we're gonna take an air hose, I'm gonna put it up in here and blow it in there to blow this out. And that gets those metal shavings out, and then we can cut these relief joints back in to here. So I actually have just enough room to cut these, but I can't leave a lip at the bottom like it had, which I don't think is a big deal. I think that's mostly just to keep from picking up drugs. I plan on keeping my tank clean and running a filter assembly, so I'm not very worried about it. So I'm just going to cut these same size slits going up the tube. And to do that, I'll just set it beside of them and mark the height. And then I'll set it in front of it and mark the width. And then just kind of freehand that out. And there's one of them. Kind of hold that there and spin it around just like that, and that, and there's our other one. And then we'll extend this thing down and go ahead and cut out these relief joints for the fuel pickup. And now I'm just going to finish filing this by hand and clean it up. Alright, now as you can see, I've kind of cut back those factory edges. You can see the inside pipe is protruding just a little bit, but I think it'll still be okay and it'll work just fine. There's no burrs on it. Let's go try this and see if it fits. Alright, moment of truth. Alright, so as soon as the threads touch, you can see the gap that it leaves, which is about 1 inch, 1.25 inches. So we should be good to go now. Like I said, I just gotta be really careful not to cross thread this. There we go. I will say that's pretty difficult with that much weight on it. I've been doing mechanic work for a long time, and that is pretty tough to navigate in there and not cross thread. And then here's our wire. Okay, so the next day a customer of mine called me. They slid off a road that I built and asked me if I could come pull them out. So I actually went and pulled somebody out yesterday, and I needed this truck and the winch to do it. So we're picking back up on this today where we left off, and first thing we're going to do is pull the cover off this junction box so we can put these wires on. And it says it in the instructions, but it's a T25 Torx bit to pull these off of this specific pump. It's a red and a black. This is just red paint from painting the pump. Kind of an industrial style of doing things. Here's the wiring harness that comes with it. I did add these connectors on, but you know, you can find those anywhere. Right there. Once we get it all the way through, it'll be able to pinch down on that now. Go ahead and tighten that down, and that'll hold the wiring harness in place. So now it's pinched in, it's held in place good, and all we have to do is connect these wires to these, and they're all color coordinated. These connectors here, they actually crimp, heat shrink, and solder at the same time. You're supposed to use a heat gun, but I've just got comfortable using a mini torch. Alright, now that the wires are together, we just have to bunch them up into this housing and bolt it back on. And now we need to put the ground screw on. Alright, to install the ground screw, that's just a body ground is what it says in the manual. We're going to pull this screw and take our ground wire, and I'm sure that it would work without this. It's just kind of an extra safety feature, but since it's here, we're going to use it. We'll just bolt this thing right onto the pump. Okay, that's got that. I'm just going to go ahead and put the ground wire down here onto this mount just because it's easy. Alright, fully wired. Alright, here's a close-up of what's going on so far. This is where the wiring went in. That's the T25 screws to bolt that cover back on. And here's the ground strap strapped down to here. And then now we're moving on to the shut-off lever, which just goes here on the side, and you can see the shape of it only goes on one way, and that goes onto this little peg, so it can only go that far up and that far down, and then it just bolts on. And then we've got the spout hanger, which goes onto this stud, and then there's a bolt hole here that lines up with these holes in the side. So just place that on there, line up the bolt hole inside, and bolt it down. And that's got that installed. And then the pump handle will just go in and hang in there. It actually sets on the off lever. So whenever you pull the pump out, you then flip the pump on and can use it. And I'm not really sure what this is. If anybody does know what this is, feel free to let me know in the comments, because I have no idea. And then we're going to go ahead and thread the handle onto this. And then this end just simply goes into here, but I'm actually going to get a filter assembly, so I'm not going to put that in. Alright, I ran out the Tractor Supply and picked up a few things. I got this filter installation kit, and I got this filter right here. It's a water block and filter combination. They have one that's just a filter, and then they have one that's water block and filter. And then that's the filter element that it uses. You can see the part numbers right there. That's what it is. And we're going to go ahead and put this on. And this is what it looks like. Everything's pre-assembled. Filter element stuff's already in there. That just locks down. It's got a drain here on the bottom. This kit's pretty self-explanatory. It's just got a straight pipe that goes into here. I forgot they make a 1-inch hose and a 3/4 hose. I have a 3/4 hose, so I will need to put these adapters on to adapt over to my hose. Otherwise, you wouldn't need it. And thread those adapters right in. And these are labeled in and out, so obviously in is going to be coming from the pump out to the hose. I'm just going to go ahead and swing it right there, line it up going off that side. And then I left this little spot behind the fuel tank to actually put the hose into. That way it can't get damaged or nothing in the bed hits it. And then this will just hang into here and set down onto the power switch like that. And with any luck, we'll have a fuel cell. For right now, until I have time to fully wire this thing to my truck, I'm just clamp it to my dump trailer battery with vice grips, and I'll be able to test it that way. Alright guys, here's the first start on this thing. As you can see, the filter assembly is empty. I've honestly never turned it on, so fingers crossed. I'm gonna put a little bit into here in case there's some trash in the lines, but here we go. Up is power on. There it is, it works. And now we're going to fuel that machine up with it. After years of using just fuel cans and transporting around the bed of the truck, flopping around, sloshing around, spilling it on yourself, definitely can get used to this. This is nice, something we've never had, and we're going to get a lot of use out of that.